So in this video I'm going to discuss that how we can actually authenticate the user and password in a login.java class. So I've created the onCreate method already, and in this I've actually started the services by using the intent. So first of all, when the user actually begin to start logging in into the application, the activity, the intent would actually pass out the control from the logging in.this class to the messaging service.class file, and that is actually the messaging service class.java file, which contain the different services for passing out the messages. So now we have actually a set content view that is actually the logging in.xml file which we have in here, and we are actually setting the layout for it, and then we are actually providing a title login to it. Then we have actually created the image button, login button, that is actually present inside the login.xml file, and I've created a reference and instantiated the username and password edit text boxes. After that, I have actually provided an on-click listener to the login button so that the person would click on the login button, and then it would be now decided that whether the user is authenticated or not, which means that whether he has a password or username in the database or not. So after the user click on the login button, there would be two else if statements, like if the service provider is equal to null. What does it really mean? Service provider we have in this case is actually the manager class, and the manager class contain the username, password, and authentication of user. So which means that if the service provider is equal to null, which means that there is no authentication, then you're going to have to get him a message and would be saying that no connected to the service, which means that no connection to the service has been made with the help of a toast message. And if the service provider dot is network connected is equal to false, which means that the service provider don't have any kind of network coverage, which means that the server is not running. That is actually when we are going to run this application, the server must be running, and as well as all the applications would be in that scenario. So if it is not, the network is not connected, which means a server, then we're going to have to toast out a message that then a service is out of reach. Then in the last if statement, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to check it out that whether the user has entered something in the username and password edit text or not, which means that if the username dot length is greater than 0 and password dot length is greater than 0, then you're going to have to provide a thread. So why we actually use a thread in here? The thread is actually used to handle actually two processes simultaneously, and that's what we are doing in here. We are actually handling two processes simultaneously. The one process would be for authenticating the user, and the other process would be for authentication failed. So these processes should be handled simultaneously in here. So to handle that two threads simultaneously, we're going to have to use a handler class. A handler class actually allows the ability to handle the two threads simultaneously. And here we actually use the handler class in here, and after using the handler class, we have actually now inside the public void run method. So in a public void run method, we have actually created a string that is actually result, and we're going to have to put out the result inside everything inside the result. So initially I've just give it a value of null, and then inside the try catch block I've just actually called out the authenticate user function. That is actually service provider or authenticate user. If I just get into the manager class, and you would find out that authenticate user method is already in here. So if in get into the login.java file, and I've now just called out the authenticate user function by using a manager class service provider dot authenticate user. So after calling on to the service provider, and I'm just gonna get the username from the edit text box by getting the text. By get text method, I'm actually getting the username from the user edit text box and then converted it to a string. And similarly, I'm doing the same process with the password by getting the text with the get text method and converted it to a string. And then after that, I'm going to check it out that if the result is equal to null, which means that there is no username or password, or if the authentication failed, means result that equals authentication failed, which means that the username and password is not present in a database, then we're going to have to use the handler to actually manage the thread, and that would be actually like toast.mactext get application context, which is actually the logging in.java context. We're going to give the toast to the user that to make sure that your password and username is correct. And if it is not happening and the result is not equal to null and the username and password is right, then we're going to have to use handler to run and to manage the other thread. That would be actually handler.post new runnable in that case, and we'll be actually providing the public void run, and we're going to be using actually intent I to pass from logging in.java class to list of friends.java class, which will be actually the main class for handling and sharing the application. So here we are actually transiting from logging in.this class, which is actually the logging in.class, to the list of friends class, and then we are actually starting the activity and finishing the login class, because when we get into the list of friends class, we're going to have to finish the login in.java class, and then we are actually starting the thread here. And if the username in here, if the like for example, I've just provided many if statements. So if the service provider, and here we are actually getting into a very fine situation in here. So I've actually now, I'm just gonna scroll to the up section, and here I've actually provided many different if statements, like if service provider is equal to null, if service provider is network connected, and if username.length and 0. So with this else if, I'm going to provide the last else statement, that if the username and length is greater than 0, which means they have the user has typed something into a edit text, then do this kind of stuff. But if the user hasn't entered anything, then you're going to have to give a toast message to them that fill both username and password in that case, and then after that you would be able to get along with that.